Today, March 21st, 2026, Rhode versus Bonta is now just days away from one of the most important hearings this case has seen in years. The Ninth Circuit has already locked in en banc oral argument for March 25th at 1 p.m. in Pasadena, which means California's ammunition background check law is about to go back in front of the full court at a critical stage. There is no new ruling yet. Nothing changes on the ground today. But this case is now officially in the window where the next major move is no longer theoretical. It is scheduled, it is confirmed, and it is close. If you watched my last Thomas Updates video on Rhode, then you already know the full background of this case, the prior panel ruling, and why the Department of Justice stepping in was a big development. So today I want to keep this tight and focused on what is actually new right now. Here's where this stands. Rhode v. Bonta is the case challenging California's ammunition purchase restrictions, including the background check requirement tied to ammunition sales. Last July, a three-judge Ninth Circuit panel ruled that California's ammunition background check regime facially violates the Second Amendment and affirmed the district court's permanent injunction. Then, on December 1st, 2025, the Ninth Circuit granted rehearing en banc and vacated that panel opinion. So the panel win is not the controlling decision right now. The case moved to the full en banc process, and that is the stage we are in today. What the court has now confirmed is straightforward. Oral argument is set for Wednesday, March 25th, 2026 at 1 p.m. in Courtroom 3 of the Richard H. Chambers Courthouse in Pasadena. The court's docket reflects the hearing notice, and counsel on both sides have acknowledged it. So this is no longer just a case sitting in procedural limbo. The next public step is on the calendar and only a few days away. That brings us to the part a lot of people are talking about online, the makeup of the en banc panel. Here's the careful version. The Ninth Circuit's public en banc status page listed the members of the en banc court as not yet available on its posted status update. Since then, secondary reporting has described the draw as more favorable than many prior Ninth Circuit Second Amendment en banc cases. That may end up being true. But unless and until the court itself publicly posts the lineup, I'm not going to present panel composition claims as confirmed court-announced fact. What is confirmed is the hearing date, the location, the posture of the case, and the legal question heading into argument. And that legal question is serious. The court is reviewing whether California can continue enforcing an ammunition sales regime that requires firearm owners to complete background checks before each ammunition purchase. If you want the full step-by-step history of how this case got here, including the earlier district court rulings and the DOJ's position, go back to my previous Thomas Updates video on Rhode v. Bonta because I already laid that out in detail there. What happens on March 25 is also worth keeping in perspective. This is oral argument, not final resolution. The judges will hear from the parties, test the legal theories, and then issue a written opinion later. That opinion could take time. So even though this hearing is a major procedural moment, it does not mean the law disappears that day, and it does not mean the case ends that day either. For now, California's ammunition restrictions remain in effect while the en banc process plays out. This is also where the DOJ's role continues to matter. As we covered earlier on Thomas Updates, the United States filed an en banc amicus brief supporting the challengers and arguing that California's ammunition background check regime cannot survive under Bruin. That does not decide the case by itself, but it does mean the court is hearing this issue with the federal government on record against California's position. If you want the full DOJ breakdown, check that earlier video. I'm not going to burn time repeating it here when the real update today is that argument day is now right in front of us. Quick reminder, if you want the March 25 breakdown as soon as it drops, subscribe to Thomas Updates. That way, when the argument happens and the questions from the bench start telling us where this may be headed, you'll have the update right away. So, what should you be watching for next? First, whether the judges focus on the basic premise that ammunition access is necessary to the exercise of the right itself. Second, whether California can point to a historical tradition strong enough to justify this kind of repeated point of sale background check system under Bruin. And third, whether the questioning suggests the court is treating this as a narrow ammunition case or as a broader methodology case that could influence how other firearm restrictions are reviewed in the Ninth Circuit. That last part is analysis, not a prediction, but it matters because sometimes the biggest consequence of an en banc decision is not only the result in one case, it is the legal approach the court chooses to use. If the en banc court writes broadly, the ripple effects could extend beyond ammunition law. If it writes narrowly, the impact may stay more contained. From there, the next steps are the usual appellate ones. After argument, the en banc court will issue a written opinion at some later date. If the challengers lose, a petition to the U.S. Supreme Court would be an obvious next possibility. If California loses, the state would then have to decide whether to seek further review. That is standard appellate analysis based on the posture of the case, not a forecast of what either side will actually do. So the clean takeaway today is this: Rhode v. Bonta is no longer just a case people are waiting on in the abstract. The en banc argument is scheduled for March 25 in Pasadena. The prior three-judge panel ruling was vacated when rehearing en banc was granted. The hearing is about what California can require before law-abiding residents buy ammunition. And while a lot of speculation is floating around about the panel itself, the confirmed public record right now is the hearing date, the case posture, and the fact that the next major stage is only days away. Thomas updates will stay on this, and if you want the full argument breakdown when it happens, subscribe and keep an eye out for the next upload. And as always, everything here is for informational and educational purposes based on public court records and filings, along with my own analysis of those materials. It is not legal advice, and if you need advice on a specific legal issue, talk to a licensed attorney in your state.